Hello and welcome to the podcast. In this episode, I thought we should look at a little case study. This case study is about an employee who's been in position for about 5 months, and I'm going to play you 3 short video clips. These are recordings from what was essentially an appraisal. The employee is talking to a panel with a chairperson. They're asking questions. Some people think that sometimes this can be a bit of a grilling. Other people think it's pretty softball. I think I veered that way as well. I don't think this meeting was particularly harsh at all. In fact, I think it was relatively convivial, which is okay. But what I'd like you to do before I begin to play this first clip is to consider how you would respond to the question that's going to be asked. What would you do in a job interview or an appraisal when asked this question? Let's look at clip number 1.
Finally, Prime Minister, you've been in the hot seat for 5 months now. You had the campaign, the general election, the euphoria of walking down Downing Street on that first day. But reflecting on your experience in the last 5 months, what would you have done differently, knowing what you know now?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say that having been 9 years in politics, all bar the last 5 months in opposition, it is far better to be in a position of power to change lives for the better than it ever is in opposition. I came into politics late in life, having had a legal career, in order to change lives for the better. I then sat in opposition for 9 years, going around the division lobbies, losing the vote every night.
So what did you think? I found it interesting. I found it fascinating. I found it a little bit worrying. He didn't answer the question. Now, the employee is called Keir, just in case you weren't aware. So employee Keir is a politician, and politicians often don't answer questions, but this one seemed to be quite straightforward. It wasn't really asking for a political opinion. It was asking about the experience of the individual. And the question that was asked is a classic one, but it's a really good one. In essence, if you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently? But we don't get that answer. Instead, what employee Keir focuses on is power. Delighted to be in power. Needs to mention it. Yeah, I'm not going to give you that answer now because I want to say how happy I am to be in power. He also mentions losing. That seems to be important. Important not to lose. Doesn't like to lose. Now, to be fair, you are probably like me, that we do actually thrive in having a bit of agency in our lives, the ability to change things. And also, most of us don't like to lose. But I guess we get a little bit philosophical about that, don't we? Through time, we begin to realise this is just part of life. And also, when we lose, well, we fail, things go wrong. But if we consider what has happened, we can decide to take some learning from it so that we can do something differently next time. So the failure becomes the learning. And therefore losing is not necessarily bad at all. Another thing of note from that first answer, as far as I'm concerned, is this phrase. I think it appeared a couple of times: change lives for the better. And notice it was power to change lives for the better. Change lives for the better. But the emotional focus, for me at least, was on power and a negative feeling about losing. Anyway, let's look at clip 2.
I'm very pleased that.
Is there any lessons you've learned, though, having been in Number 10, seen the machinery of Whitehall, had your levers on the hands of power? Anything you would do differently if you would give your former self, your 5 months ago self, some advice? What would that be?
Well, look, I mean, I knew it'd be tough. I knew the inheritance was going to be pretty awful. It's worse than I thought in every respect. There was £22 billion missing from the economy. The prisons were so overfull that when we had the disorder in the summer, I had to have I had to have the figures up in the corner of the room, in the Cobra room, as to how many prison places we had in every prison around the country, because we're at bursting point when we were trying to arrest people.
So what did you think of that clip? Well, again, there was no answer to the question. This time, employee Keir, well, he talked about, almost ranted a little bit, about the person who had the job before him. Look at what they did. They left me with a mess. But what have you learned? I want to talk about them. I want to complain, to have a bit of a gripe. And it's £22 billion. Actually, we might revisit that soon, because there's a potentially different perspective on that. But anyway, what else does he do? He talks about his frustration. I had things on the wall in this Cobra meeting, and it was numbers, and I was shocked. It was prison numbers. He seems to have escaped the irony in that situation, that he, in part, was actually the cause of at least some of those numbers. I mean, employee Keir wanted to crack down hard, wanted to, allegedly at least, make an example, make a statement, stamp his authority. And I'm not saying that actions shouldn't have been taken, but it's just weird how he's saying, and I had to do all this stuff. I guess when he said shocked, he meant about the numbers. But isn't that something he should have known anyway? However, let's move on and look at clip number 3.
So we all know that because you've said that before. I'm just being. But is there anything? But is there anything that you would do differently if you were starting out now, knowing what you know?
No, we had to do tough stuff. We're getting on with it, and I'm very pleased to be delivering from a position of power rather than going around the division lobbies losing every night. I've had too much of that.
Well,
shockingly, but in some ways not surprisingly, the answer was no. Wouldn't do anything differently. No. Nothing? I mean, this is someone who's gone from opposition to the most powerful job in the country, one of the most powerful jobs in the world, the most influential, with all the pressures and opportunities and traps, etc. If I look back 5 months ago, I haven't changed jobs. Things have been pretty much the same all the way through the 5 months. And yet, if I go back and imagine what I might have done differently, there are things. I wouldn't have said that. I would have said this. Oh, I did that the wrong way. Gosh, I could kick myself. Well, not employee Keir, not at all. The fact that he wouldn't change anything, there's nothing he would do differently, implies that he's totally happy with all that has happened. And so I've more than 2 issues with that, but one is that means that he couldn't even recognize that this was an opportunity to humanize himself a little bit, that this was an opportunity to show some self-awareness, some humility, some contrition, some regret. Nothing at all. And the second thing I believe that this shows up, and I'm sure that there are more things, is that in that moment, by saying no, he is effectively signing off all the stuff that's happened. He's essentially saying, if I'd done, or at least in my opinion, he's essentially saying, if I'd done things a different way, then I would regret that. And so I would be less happy. And if you consider what has happened, that's quite the statement. Or at least that's my interpretation of what is happening. That is his statement in essence. That is contained in saying, I would do nothing differently. It really is quite astounding. But then, what do we get? He says no, but goes back to power. Power again. Power and losing. Had enough of that. Had enough of that. Power. It's great to be in power. But note, he doesn't use the word lead or leading or the phrase to lead. He doesn't say in charge. He certainly doesn't say to serve, to be of service. Nothing. It's power. And maybe I shouldn't read too much into that, but looking at other aspects of employee Keir's behaviours and demeanour, I feel that I have to read something into that. I believe that that is important to him. And he could argue, and you may well argue, that, well, yeah, well, of course he needs the power to make changes. But I just think that were it me, you may be different, I probably would have said, I've learned that it's really important to do the right thing. It's really important to learn from my mistakes. But it's an honour to be serving. It's an honour to be doing this stuff. It's a big job. I haven't gotten it all right. Something like that. Let's listen to someone talking about that 22 billion that may just put a slightly different spin on it.
You know what the Prime Minister says and what the Chancellor says. They claim they've discovered this £22 billion black hole. Your facial expression looks sceptical about that. You're smiling. But that's why they say they're doing it. And they have said they had no choice but to cut this payment to pensioners.
Well, first of all, my view is that everything you needed to know about the state of the finances was in the public domain, and the rest of it could be guessed at. And this idea they had no choice, politics is about choosing, and there were other ways to raise that money.
No government can change the way our bodies age, and in particular those of us who started work at 15 in the 70s, a lifetime of menial and heavy jobs that are vital but unnoticed. Like other members, I've also been contacted by constituents. This morning, Margaret Cutty phoned me during her office tea break. She works mostly on her feet, but with lots of lifting as well, and in the past year she has had 3 operations. Her husband has just had a triple heart bypass, and she wants to be able to spend more time caring for him as he grows older. Because of these changes, she won't be able to do that.
I understand that women affected by the changes to the state pension age feel disappointed by this decision, but we looked in full at the Ombudsman recommendations, and they said that around 90% of women did know that these changes were coming, and as Chancellor I have to account for every penny of taxpayers' money spent.
In the interest of fair play, let me interject here to read you this news article. But Angela Madden, chair of WASPE, that's Women Against State Pension Inequality, campaign group, said the 90% figure refers to women who had a vague awareness the state pension age might happen for others in the future. She said the Ombudsman found 60% of women had no idea the state pension age was rising and accused the government of attempting to cherry-pick data, which she said was spreading dangerous misinformation, plain and simple. Sir Keir using a 90% figure isn't just misleading, it's an insult to millions of 1950s-born women who were blindsided by these changes, she added.
I don't believe it!
Actually adds quite a bit to demand going forward because of the planned increases in investment and in public current spending as well. But against that, particularly the increase in national insurance contributions has probably hit businesses, particularly businesses paying relatively employing relatively unskilled labour, because the bit of the national insurance increase that's, I think, particularly significant is the reduction in the threshold at which employers have to start, so that you're bringing quite a lot of low-paid labour into the net. And businesses can't respond by cutting those workers' wages because they're already near the national living wage floor. And what you'll see in response, therefore, is businesses either trying to push it through in prices or cutting their employment and potentially also cutting some of their investment.
The Farmer Minister has apparently said this morning that your members should be calm. Are you feeling calm?
I think the industry's feeling betrayed, feeling angry.
People don't vote Labour only for a few weeks later. People, the Labour Party take money off pensioners.
So where does that leave us? I think it leaves us with someone who is not the right person for the role, not the right fit for the job at all. And in terms of the well-being of the nation, by any measure, it's not good. So if you liked this video, by the way, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really does help. And give it a like, and also give it a share, because that sharing is probably more important than anything right now. If there's any way to get this to some members of the Labour Party, as in the people who are the politicians at whatever level, then see if you can get it to them. It's not a particularly long video, but I really believe that the Labour Party has to look at themselves and answer the following question.
Hans, are we the baddies?
Merry Christmas.
Try to imagine a house that's full of cold. Try to imagine being 80 years old. That's where I'll be since Keir left me. I wish tears could heat my home. What can I do without fuel? I've got no place to go. It'll be freezing this Christmas without fuel at home. It'll be freezing this Christmas while Keir Starmer's warm. It'll be cold, so cold, without fuel at home this Christmas.
A very happy Christmas. Don't have nightmares.